Right now, somewhere in the world, there's a person with less money than you, less time than you, and far more problems than you. And yet they're happier than you are. Not because life was more generous with them, not because they got lucky, but because, without even realizing it, they built a handful of small habits into their routine. Habits so simple you'd walk right past them if I didn't stop you now to show you. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what those habits are. Not vague advice like, be positive. Real, specific, repeatable actions practiced daily by the calmest, most fulfilled people on earth. Habits rooted in over 2,000 years of Stoic wisdom, taught by men who buried their children, lost empires, and were exiled from everything they loved, and still found peace. Stay until the end, because habit number 7 is the one almost nobody talks about, and it might be the most important one on this entire list. Welcome back to Unshakable Words, the place where ancient philosophy meets real life. If you're new here, this channel exists for one reason: to turn the hard-won wisdom of men like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus into something you can actually use today. Not classroom theory. Practical tools for living well. If that's what you need right now, what you're about to hear in the next few minutes could change how you get through the rest of this week. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth. You've probably been chasing happiness in the wrong direction for a good chunk of your life. Not because you're foolish, but because everyone around you chases it exactly the same wrong way. The next job, the next relationship, the next purchase, the next achievement that will finally make you feel like you've arrived. And maybe you've already noticed something unsettling. Every time you arrive, the finish line moves. You get the raise, and 2 months later it's normal, and you're already chasing the next thing. This isn't a personal flaw. It's a documented psychological pattern called hedonic adaptation. Human beings return to a baseline level of happiness regardless of what happens, good or bad. Win the lottery, and within a year, your happiness settles back close to where it was before. Lose the use of your legs, and remarkably, the same thing happens in reverse. The Stoics understood this more than 2,000 years before psychology gave it a name. They watched wealthy senators, powerful generals, celebrated poets chase external things and end up miserable, while slaves, exiles, and prisoners sometimes reached a kind of peace no amount of money could buy. From this repeated observation in Roman society, they drew a simple, radical idea. Happiness isn't something that happens to you. It's something you build, brick by brick, through what you do with your days. It's not your circumstances. It's your habits. Picture 2 people. Same city, same salary, same amount of trouble in any given week. One wakes up already reaching for their phone, spends the day reacting to whatever screams for attention, argues internally with everything that goes wrong, and falls asleep scrolling, replaying the day's frustrations. The other wakes up with a few minutes of silence that belong only to them, meets the same frustrations with a different internal question, spends energy only on what's actually within their control, and ends the day with an honest reflection before sleep. Same city, same salary, same amount of difficulty in the month. Radically different internal experiences. The distance between these 2 people isn't talent, luck, or personality. It's habit, repeated daily until it becomes identity. This video will walk you through 9 of those habits. Small, doable, almost mundane in their simplicity, but backed by ancient Stoic philosophy and modern psychology. These aren't habits of monks with no responsibilities on a mountain. They're habits practiced by emperors commanding wars, by philosophers who lost everything, by ordinary people just like you, buried in deadlines, bills, traffic, and difficult relatives. Let's start with the first one, because it's probably the opposite of everything you've been taught your whole life. Marcus Aurelius was, by any measure, one of the most powerful men who ever lived. Emperor of Rome, commander of legions, a man whose decisions shaped the fate of millions. And yet, on most mornings of his adult life, before the demands of the empire fell on him, he did something remarkably ordinary. He sat down, often before dawn, often exhausted, often reluctant, and wrote to himself. We know this because those private notes survived. Today we call them meditations, though he never intended for other eyes to read them. In one of the most famous passages, he writes something like, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being." Think about that. The most powerful man in the known world needed to convince himself to get out of bed. The difference between him and you isn't superhuman motivation. It's a ritual, a moment before the chaos began, where he decided who he'd be that day. Happy people don't just wake up and let the day happen to them. They reclaim the first few minutes as theirs, before the phone, before the inbox, before anyone else's demands enter the room. It doesn't have to be an hour of meditation and cold showers. That's the version social media sells, and it's exhausting just to watch. In practice, for most people, it's 5 or 10 minutes. A quiet coffee. A short walk before checking a single notification. This works for a mechanical reason, not a mystical one. The first thing you do in the morning sets the tone for your nervous system for hours. If the first thing you do is open your phone and absorb 15 strangers' opinions, you hand over the steering wheel of your emotional state before you've even gotten out of bed. You become reactive before you've had a chance to be intentional. Epictetus, a man who spent years as a slave before becoming one of history's great philosophers, put it directly. Some things are within our control and some are not. Your circumstances arrive whether you want them to or not. But how you receive them, that first internal stance, is yours. Claim it before the world claims it for you. Try this tomorrow. Before touching your phone, before checking anything, give yourself 60 seconds. Just 60. Ask yourself, who do I want to be today? You don't need a perfect answer. You just need to ask before the noise starts. There's an account about Epictetus that illustrates this habit better than any explanation could. Still a slave, his leg was broken. Some accounts say by his own master's cruelty. Tradition says Epictetus responded not with rage, but with almost clinical calm, warning that continued force would break the limb. And when it happened, he simply observed, "I told you so." No hysteria, no collapse. He accepted what had already happened, because arguing with a broken bone doesn't fix it. This might seem almost inhuman at first, but stay with me, because there's something profound hidden in it. Most human suffering doesn't come from events themselves. It comes from our resistance to events that have already happened and can't be changed. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The event lasts 2 seconds, but some people carry the irritation of that instant for the next 30 minutes, replaying it, narrating it, letting it poison the whole morning. The traffic didn't ruin their day. Their argument with reality did. Marcus Aurelius wrote about this constantly, almost as if he needed the reminder daily, because he did. He said the obstacle on the path becomes the path itself. Everything that blocks action becomes the action. Rain cancels your plans. Well, the rain is now part of the plan. Arguing with what's already happened is a battle you can't win. And fighting an unwinnable battle is where unhappiness lives. Happy people aren't people to whom nothing bad ever happens. That's a myth, and clinging to it will only make you feel betrayed by life every time something goes wrong, because something always does. Happy people are people trained to ask a different question when things go wrong. Not, why is this happening to me? A question with no useful answer, one that just spins you in circles. Instead, given that this happened, What's the most useful thing I can do now? This shift from why me to what now is one of the most powerful tools in the entire Stoic arsenal, and it costs nothing to practice. Think of someone who lost a job and spent months replaying the injustice of it. That cycle doesn't bring the job back. It just extends the wound, long after the original event ended. Now think of someone who lost a job and within a week was already updating their resume, reaching out to old contacts, treating the layoff as a strange kind of starting line instead of a life sentence. Same event, completely different outcomes. The difference wasn't luck. It was which question each person asked first. This week, the next time something frustrating happens, allow yourself to feel it for exactly 1 minute. Feel it fully. Stoicism was never about suppressing emotion. That's a common misunderstanding. It was about not being governed by it. Feel it fully for 60 seconds, then ask, now what? Marcus Aurelius drew a distinction that changed how I think about my own anxiety. He separates the things that depend on us from the things that don't. Our judgments, our efforts, our conduct depend on us. Our body, our reputation, other people's opinions do not depend on us, no matter how much we obsess over them. Here's what almost no one tells you about unhappiness. A huge part of it comes from spending your limited emotional energy on things that were never yours to control. What a stranger thinks of you online. Whether your kids turn out okay in 20 years. Real worries, and almost entirely outside your control right now. Happy people aren't people who don't care about these things. They're people who got brutally honest about where the line sits and stopped bleeding energy across it. They keep working hard, keep loving deeply, but they've learned to let go of the outcome the moment the effort ends. Test this week. Every time you notice yourself spiraling, replaying a conversation, obsessing over someone's opinion, ask directly, does this actually depend on me right now, in this moment? If the answer is no, you're not being invited to stop caring. You're being invited to stop suffering over something your suffering won't change. I want to be honest with you here. This is genuinely hard to practice, especially with people we love. The Stoics weren't saying stop loving people. They were saying love fully, be present fully, and let go of control over what isn't yours to control. Because gripping tighter doesn't protect the people we love. It just exhausts us without changing anything for them. Letting go isn't loving less. It's suffering less for the exact same amount of love. Seneca, in his letters to a young friend named Lucilius, described a nightly practice learned from another philosopher. When the lights went out and the house went quiet, ask yourself a series of honest questions. What flaw did I resist today? In what way am I better? He described reviewing the entire day, what he said and did, without hiding anything from himself. This isn't the same as journaling for the sake of journaling. It's closer to an honest audit, not for punishment. Seneca is explicit. It should be done with kindness, like a friend reviewing your conduct, not an enemy hunting for ammunition. The goal isn't guilt, it's awareness. Here's why this correlates so strongly with happiness. Most people carry a vague, constant sense that their days are passing without anything being learned or built. That sensation produces a quiet anxiety underneath everything else. The nightly review interrupts this, forcing you to notice, even on an ordinary Tuesday, some evidence that you're growing. Start tonight, in under 5 minutes. Ask 3 things before bed. What went well today, and why? Where did I fall short of the person I want to be, and what will I do differently tomorrow? And what, even something small, am I genuinely grateful for today? This habit gets skipped more than almost any other on this list, because it requires looking directly at the parts of your day you'd rather forget. But avoiding the discomfort of a 5-minute review doesn't make the discomfort disappear. It just lets it quietly pile up into something much heavier. There's a Stoic practice with a Latin name that sounds intimidating, but is simple once you understand it. Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortunes. Seneca recommended that before any journey, any undertaking, you spend a few minutes imagining what could go wrong. Not to catastrophize, but to mentally rehearse the difficulty so that if it arrives, it meets a mind that has already faced it, at least in imagination. This seems, at first, like the exact opposite of relentless positive thinking, and in a sense it is. But here's what's fascinating. Modern psychology arrived, independently, at nearly the same conclusion. It's called defensive pessimism, or mental contrasting. Studies find that people who briefly rehearse obstacles before pursuing a goal tend to perform better and report less anxiety than people who only visualize success. Why would imagining bad outcomes make someone happier, not more anxious? Because most anxiety isn't caused by the difficulty itself. It's caused by difficulty arriving unrehearsed, catching us in denial that it could happen to us. When traffic shows up and you're already 15 minutes late, the person who never considered "what if I hit traffic" experiences pure, unannounced panic. The person who spent 30 seconds that morning thinking traffic could happen, and if it does, I'll call ahead, experiences only mild inconvenience because part of their mind already lived that scenario and already decided how to handle it. Marcus Aurelius did this daily, almost like armor. He reminded himself every morning that that day he might meet the ungrateful, the arrogant, the dishonest, not to expect the worst from everyone, but so that if it happened, he wasn't caught off guard by behavior that is, honestly, an ordinary part of being human among other humans. Try it before something that makes you nervous this week. A difficult conversation, a presentation, a first date. Spend 90 seconds asking, what's the realistically worst version of this? And if it happened, what would I actually do? You'll walk in steadier, because part of you has already been there. Seneca, already wealthy, periodically decided to live like a poor man. Rough clothes, simple food, a hard bed, so that if fortune ever took his wealth away, he'd already know, from direct experience, that he'd survive without falling apart. He wanted to test, on his own terms, whether poverty was really the terrible thing he feared it to be. And he discovered, repeatedly, that it wasn't nearly as bad as the fear of it. This is the ancient root of something you might recognize from modern life without knowing its origin. Cold showers, fasting, deliberately hard workouts, voluntary discomfort. And here's why happy people build this into their lives on purpose instead of simply avoiding all discomfort, the way most of us are trained to by a culture of convenience. Unlimited comfort, quietly, makes people fragile. If your nervous system has never practiced tolerating an uncomfortable sensation, real hunger, real cold, real physical effort, then the first time real hardship arrives uninvited, illness, loss, adversity, it hits a mind and body that never practiced staying calm under discomfort. But if you sat with discomfort voluntarily, on your own terms, you build something like an emotional and physical callus. Not numbness, resilience. There's also a subtler gift hidden in this habit. When you deliberately give something up, skip a meal, take a cold shower, go an hour without your phone, you rediscover, almost every time, how much you already have. Try this week, and I promise it's not as extreme as it sounds. Pick one small comfort, the extra 10 minutes of screen time in bed, the elevator instead of the stairs, and remove it on purpose for just one day. Notice what happens afterward, when that small comfort returns. It tends to briefly feel like a real gift again, instead of something you'd stopped noticing. Seneca wrote to Lucilius, insisting he spend time daily with the great minds who came before him, that he read deeply rather than widely, returning repeatedly to a small number of writers who actually shaped his character instead of skimming everything available. Here's why this belongs on a list about happiness, of all things. Every person alive today is, whether they notice or not, absorbing the values of whatever they consume most often. If the bulk of your daily consumption is outrage and comparison, the diet most people are unknowingly fed by algorithms optimized purely for engagement, not well-being. Your inner state will reflect exactly that. The happiest people I've studied and read about share a quiet trait. They curate what enters their mind with the same seriousness others apply to what enters their body. They spend time, even just 20 minutes a day, with writings that have survived hundreds or thousands of years, because a piece of writing that has survived that long, by definition, said something sufficiently true about human nature to keep mattering across centuries and entirely different civilizations. This doesn't mean throwing away your phone or becoming a hermit. It means being intentional. 20 minutes with meditations, with letters from a Stoic, does something 20 minutes of scrolling simply can't. It hands you a perspective built by someone who already survived what you're facing right now. Grief, ambition, fear, failure. Start like this. Pick one page, just one, from a genuinely great and ancient book, and read it calmly before picking up your phone in the morning. Think of it like choosing dinner guests every night. Would you invite the version of humanity currently screaming for attention on your phone? Outraged, exaggerating? Or would you rather sit with someone like Marcus Aurelius, exhausted after a day commanding an empire, quietly admitting that he too struggled, he too failed, he too had to start over the next morning? One guest leaves you agitated, the other leaves you steadier than before you sat down. If any of these first habits described a part of your life you already suspected needed attention, that's not coincidence, and it's not an accident. Some part of you already knows which of these habits is missing. Hold on to that feeling, because I'm going to ask you about it directly. Marcus Aurelius opens Meditations by listing the people in his life and what each one taught him. His grandfather's kindness, his mother's generosity. This is gratitude, but not the greeting card version mocked online. It's precise, specific, almost forensic in detail. And it's exactly that specificity that makes it work. Modern psychology confirms this almost perfectly. Vague gratitude, repeated the same way every day, loses emotional power fast because the brain adapts to repeated, unvaried statements. But specific gratitude, naming exactly what someone did and why it mattered, keeps producing a real emotional response because it forces your mind to relive the moment instead of just repeating a phrase. Happy people don't wait to feel grateful. That's the crucial distinction. They treat gratitude as a discipline, practiced on purpose, whether or not the feeling is there beforehand. Marcus Aurelius, on a day when the empire was crumbling around him, still sat down and named specifically what his teachers and family had given him. He didn't wait until he felt like it. The practice came first. The feeling, most of the time, followed. Try tonight, and be specific. This is the part almost everyone gets wrong. Not, I'm grateful for my friend. Instead, I'm grateful my friend called me back at 11 at night last week, even though he had work the next morning, just because he could hear something was wrong in my voice. That level of detail is what actually moves the needle. Vague gratitude is a habit that fades. Specific gratitude is a habit that accumulates. This might seem like the darkest habit on this entire list, and I understand if it makes you uneasy. But stay with me, because this is, without exaggeration, one of the most transformative ideas in the entire Stoic tradition. Memento Mori. Remember that you will die. Roman generals, according to tradition, had a servant walking behind them during victory parades, whispering some version of, "Remember you are mortal," even in the greatest moments of triumph, when it would have been easiest to feel invincible. Marcus Aurelius returns to this idea constantly throughout Meditations, reminding himself, repeatedly, that he could leave this life right now, and that this thought, instead of being a source of dread, should shape every choice about what he says, does, and thinks in the time that remains. Here's why this belongs at the top of a list about happiness, of all places. Almost everything that steals our happiness, grudges we don't let go of, arguments we keep alive out of pride, hours spent scrolling, years spent putting off the conversation we need to have, the apology, the call, the I love you, we assume we'll always have time to say later, all of it depends on a hidden assumption. Most of us never examine the assumption that we have unlimited time. The moment you genuinely sit with the fact that your time is not unlimited, not in a morbid, paralyzing way, but in a clarifying way, your priorities reorganize almost instantly. The grudge suddenly feels smaller. The argument suddenly feels like a terrible use of a limited resource. The call you've been putting off suddenly feels urgent in a way it didn't 5 minutes ago. Tonight, gently ask yourself, if I had significantly less time than I assume I have, what would I stop tolerating? What would I finally say? What would stop mattering altogether? Almost everyone who has sat beside a dying parent or survived a serious diagnosis describes some version of the same realization afterward. How much time they spent on things that, in hindsight, barely mattered, and how little time they spent on the handful of things that meant everything. The tragedy isn't that this realization comes. The tragedy is how often it comes only after the time to act on it has already run out. In the year 175 AD, the word reached Marcus Aurelius that one of his own generals, a man named Avidius Cassius, had declared himself emperor and rebelled against him. A betrayal from someone he trusted in the middle of a war, at a moment when Marcus was already exhausted, already grieving, already stretched beyond what any reasonable person should be asked to bear. By all accounts, this was one of the darkest moments of his reign. And what did he do? Historical accounts describe him marching toward the confrontation, not with vengeance in his heart, but saying, according to tradition, that he hoped to have the chance to show the traitor clemency instead of punishment. Before the two armies could meet, Cassius was killed by his own soldiers. When his head was brought to Marcus, tradition holds that Marcus refused to celebrate and ordered it buried with honors instead of displayed. Stop and think about that for a moment. A man betrayed at the worst possible moment, with every justification for wanting revenge, chose clemency. Not because he was weak, but because he had spent years training himself day after day in exactly the habits we've walked through today. The morning reflection that reminded him who he wanted to be, the refusal to argue with what had already happened, the discipline of controlling only what was his to control, the nightly honesty, the rehearsal of hardship, the voluntary discomfort that had already taught him he could survive worse, the wisdom of those who came before him, gratitude for what remained, and the quiet, constant awareness that none of it, his power, his empire, his own life, would last forever. This isn't a man who got lucky with a peaceful temperament. He's a man who built peace, brick by brick, through 9 small habits practiced on ordinary days, so that on the worst day of his reign, peace simply showed up, because it was already there. You won't face a military rebellion this week, but you will face something. A frustration, a disappointment, a moment where the old version of you would spiral. And in that moment, the only thing standing between you and peace will be whether you built the habit beforehand or you're trying to invent it for the first time under pressure. The happiest people you'll ever meet aren't happier because life was easier on them. Marcus Aurelius buried several children and led Rome through a devastating plague while personally commanding brutal military campaigns. Seneca was exiled, then forced to take his own life by a tyrant he himself had educated. Epictetus began life enslaved, his body permanently damaged by cruelty. None of them had an easy path. All of them still found peace. Through 9 small, repeatable, almost mundane habits, claiming the first minutes of the day before the world claims them, refusing to argue with a reality that's already happened, restricting worry to only what's actually within your control, reviewing each day with honesty, without cruelty, rehearsing hardship before it arrives so it never catches you off guard, choosing discomfort on purpose so real hardship never breaks you when it arrives uninvited, spending time daily with minds wiser than your own, practicing gratitude as a discipline instead of waiting for a feeling, and remembering without fear that time is finite, letting that single fact clarify everything else on this list. None of these habits require money. None require anyone's permission. None require your circumstances to change, not even a little before you can start. That's exactly what makes them so powerful, and exactly why they've survived, completely intact, for over 2,000 years. Because they never depended on circumstances to begin. You don't need to adopt all 9 starting tomorrow. Pick just one. The one that made you pause somewhere. The one that quietly bothered you a little. Practice that single habit for the next 7 days, deliberately and on purpose, and watch, really watch, what changes. If this gave you something real, something worth carrying into tomorrow, I genuinely appreciate it. It's a small action that helps this message reach someone who might need to hear it exactly as much as you needed to today. Until next time, and remember, you don't need better circumstances to build a better life. You need better habits. Start with one today.